Hello and welcome back to Better Than Adventure. It's the same story as last time. Did you know that, on average, 85% of statistics are made up? Did you know that on average I'm a little bit tired of, a lot of stuff? Just, I don't know, man. It's been one of those things where you just kind of see things unfold and it's like, well, for one, sometimes you start losing faith in like other humans, just in general. Not even referring to anything specific this time. Just man, like oh well. It's just I don't know. I've recently been thinking about everything, and it's just like it's kind of funny how things will just kind of get worse for most people. I'm fortunate enough that it won't just get worse for me, but it's still depressing to think about. Cause like fucking, it's like people don't think about this, right? But like, mathematically speaking, if you're watching this video, you're probably like, even if you consider yourself relatively unfortunate, right? Like, could be worse. Could be like born in the fucking war-torn hellhole, and you weren't. Which I'm aware isn't like very high praise if you're literally starving. But, I mean, it's one of those things which makes me kind of think. Because it is true. Like, a lot of people are a lot more sort of technically fortunate than, they may think. And it's one of those things where, like, it's not like one of those, oh, suck it up sort of things, but more just like, there are people who have still persevered and found some kind of success, even, regardless of, their circumstances. So, like, you may as well try. I remember seeing this one article, not even article, this one post that was like a series of images from Diary of a Wimpy Kid, which I've never seen, because it's not a thing in curriculums outside of the United States, I believe. And, I mean, maybe some other English-speaking countries have it, I don't know. But, the story was that there were, like, three characters. Greg, who's, like, the main the main character. Then Rowley, who's, like, one of his friends. And then there's Fragley. And, they're, like, the three levels of autism that somebody can sort of, exhibit. But not, like, three levels of, like, but not like three different levels of like how affected somebody is, quote unquote, but like how much they show it, if that makes sense. So like Greg is the guy who is like trying to at every point in his life mask his autism, and he can become friends with somebody like Rowley, who is like the sort of medium where if you ask him about some of his special interests, he will talk on about them endlessly. And like, it's not kind of like, being someone, the point is, right? Between these two first characters, right? Greg is the guy who is like continuously trying to self-mask. He can never be himself. He's continuously concerned with how he appears to everyone. And Rowley is in a really similar position like him, except he just, doesn't care as much about, oh, how will everybody perceive me for every single action I do? And because of that, he can find more genuine connections with people because, people will see him for who he is. And of course, not everybody will, not everybody will be interested in your personality if you do that, but literally nobody is going to be interested in your personality if you're, always trying to, mask and appear, the most socially acceptable. And then finally, there's, like, Fragley, I hope I'm not mispronouncing that, whose entire point is that he is, like, he is, like, the kind of person who you see stereotyped, Like, he is loud, he's, like, in his own universe, basically, in terms of, like, his interests, his understanding, blah, blah, blah. He is, perfectly happy in his own existence and unbothered by wider society. And at the end of the day, the joke, or I guess the point of the post was that, like, both the guy who's just open about himself and the guy who either doesn't care or doesn't really have the capacity to care, both of these people are gonna have, like, an enjoyable time in their life, hanging out with people and such. So, like, both of these people are gonna find, like, some kind of happiness or success in life. Granted, with Fragley, what he deems a success may be a little bit different to what other people see as success, but he'll still find some kind of happiness, even if it's entirely his own. But somebody like Greg won't, because Greg's happiness entirely relies upon, like, getting other people to, getting seen as the reasonable and normal one, and, that's not really something you can accomplish. People have tried. People haven't. Wait, I'm gonna have to go back and light up the steps over there before it's too late. It's not one of those things. It's an interesting thing to see. As somebody who's never been ever diagnosed with autism, I just find it kind of interesting because, I mean, it is interesting, I would say. It's just, like, not something I've ever thought about. Quite obviously, I guess, but, like, yeah, it is definitely something worth thinking about, even if I may not have thought about it. I may have phrased that kind of awkwardly, but I find it funny, so yeah, whatever. But yeah. And, like, obviously, if we're comparing, like, sort of, let's call it success, we all basically understand that, like, Fragley's success, what he will see as success, isn't really what most people would call successful. Though, to be fair, the people there are kids, but, like, applying the thing to, like, adults, right? Like, what Fragley may see as being successful is obviously gonna be stuff that maybe a lot of us would find remarkably unfulfilling. But that's sort of the thing, right? Kind of like, beauty is in the eye of the beholder. Success is in the eye of the person who's, experiencing it. Which means, whenever somebody, which means, whenever somebody is proud of being a Discord moderator, that also means that, you just gotta let them appreciate their endeavors, But memes aside, I think it's interesting. But yeah, I was thinking about this because, like, I don't know, I just randomly came across it and it kind of struck me as interesting because, really, those are like the three kind of it's not just an autism thing. Like oh shit, it's not just an autism thing, but I feel like it's also like it can be applied to other stuff. But I feel like the autism part is just more straightforward, I guess. But like it is what it is, you know? It's not like it's particularly deep TM, it's more like just interesting. But, you know, could always be worse. I have to be down here for this one. But yeah. Hold on. Yeah, I don't know. So yeah. Though a big fan of, funny esoteric hardware bullshit I may be, I am not very well versed in children's literature from other countries. My apologies. Right up to here. Yeah, yeah. Oops. Happened again. Right? Yeah. Hmm. But yeah, it's very much one of, like, those things that are kind of interesting to ponder, but, like... Not that in... Oh, I did that one wrong. That's why this fell off. You know, it's, one of those sorts of things. I don't know. Because, like, if I had to explain my own understanding of the world, it would be, like... Yeah, because, like, there are, like, in general, a few kinds of people, right? Like, there are the kinds of people who will always, like, no matter the situation, try to fit in. The people who will just be themselves and see where it takes them. And then you obviously have the people who will, like, you know, just not care. You know, the shrugma, or whatever. Though, to be fair, like, it's kind of funny because so much of the quote-unquote... I mean, this is an old thing now, which is kind of funny to say, but, like, it is kind of funny how many of the, like, Sigma male traits were, like, just things on, like, the autism / ADHD spectrum. Because, I mean, yeah. But yeah, what I kind of find funny most of all, though, is, so there's this kind of idea, right, where, there's this sort of preconception, right, in a lot of... And this is something which I've noticed, at least, right? Like, in a lot of gaming communities these days, something has kind of changed, and I feel like a big part of it had to come from the pandemic. Because back in the day, you know, a lot of the gaming community was comprised by, well, I would use some other terms, but for this video, let's use capital G gamers. You know, it was gaming was populated by people who called it, like, you know, their hobby, right? However, after the pandemic, a lot of gaming culture kind of got splashed around by people who were thrust into the pandemic and, like, you know, shoved in their houses with nothing to do. Obviously, the problem with that is that they had to do something, because otherwise you go insane like the feral ghouls in Fallout. So a lot of them took up gaming. However, because a lot of the people who were previously not into gaming took up gaming, this kind of caused a bit of a weird splinter, where there's now a large part of quote-unquote gamers who aren't really connected to the... Like, they're not connected to the Overmind anymore. They're just, like, floating about freely, and a new brood war may begin one day. And, the joke here is, not the StarCraft reference, but the fact that, basically, what's happening as of late, you've seen it with, like, Resident Evil, is that, fandoms started to change from, like, things really, really dedicated fans were doing to, something which people who... Oh, I fucked this up twice. To, something people who weren't really into... Like, okay, fandom stopped being something that you would do out of love for something, and it would be like, like, you know, people who are in the fandom of Resident Evil do not play the Resident Evil games. That is something the Resident Evil fans do. That is because a fandom is, not the fans of the game. I know, it sounds complicated, that's because it is, there's gonna be on the test. Like, the fandom isn't actually the fans of something. It's, the people who like to imagine themselves as fans of that thing. So, in Resident Evil's case, the fans are the people who play the games, and the fandoms are the people online who, like, talk about how much they love Resident Evil. And the problem here is that, fandoms can be really influential, both in really bad ways and, like, really neutral ways. The jury is still out if, we don't know if they can affect fans, like, we don't know if they can affect the community in a positive way. But, generally, there have been games where fandoms have overtaken actual fan communities, and it's been a catastrophic disaster for everybody involved. Oftentimes, the end result of this is nobody in the fandom playing the games that they're supposed to be fans of. One of the earliest memes about this was, you know, Earthbound, where, you know, huge fan of Earthbound is excited to finally play it for the first time. That was meant to be a joke. Not a joke anymore. How many FNAF fans have actually played FNAF? None of them. How many fans of, like, Undertale have actually played the game, or Deltarune? Probably not that many. Chances are they just watched their streamer play it. Which I find funny, because I don't know if it was Markiplier or somebody else, but I know that, like, one of the big guys played through a few episodes and got so much harassment from people because he was apparently picking the wrong dialogue choices. He was just like, nope. I'm not playing this anymore, then. If you're gonna be so mad at me, then I guess you don't want me to play. And that was kind of funny to see. But, like, I mean, yeah, these are the consequences of the fandom. And I mean, it does kind of... It's not like fans themselves can't be particularly shitty. If you've ever come even, like, within smelling distance of the average FromSoft game, you know who I'm talking about. You see, FromSoft games, you know, Souls games and all the ones that came before it, which are the better ones, if you don't know. Basically, the way they're designed is a sort of, I'm gonna call it like skill versus investment sort of thing, right? Like, there will be tools that are, or like, let's just say weapons, right? There will be weapons that are easier to acquire, but are less powerful. And there are gonna be, maybe strategies, maybe weapons, maybe combinations of stuff that are gonna be harder to acquire, but are balanced in their difficulty to, being acquired by being more powerful in some way. Magic is a great example of this because, as I remember reading, oh, but Magic in insert, Souls game is so much harder to get, and it's also weirdly powerful. Yeah, that's the point. It's so if you're struggling with the game, instead of, like, ramming your face against the fucking wall, you can just go there and try to get some magic. You can level up. You can do all sorts of stuff. It's kind of, like, funny to me that so much of, like, why Dark Souls has its, difficulty reputation is because, like, capital G gamers convinced a large portion of the, like, internet population, let's call them, that the only way you can play a Souls game is by, having a big sword and then, fighting with the big sword and then you win. And how dare you use any of the other weapons the developers put in the game? This is a Miyazaki testing you, like, how, like, it's just like, it's in Miyazaki's testing your faith by putting in all these other incredibly interesting weapon combinations and tools which you can use. But no, obviously the entire game is designed around this one combat style. And the sad part is, FromSoft was a company that was always very receptive to fan feedback, even after the very first Kingfield game, like the one from Japan that we didn't get in the West until a translation many years later. And the funny thing is, like, even back then, FromSoft was so excited that, like, the people working there were so excited, they immediately asked the fans of their one video game that they made for feedback. But the issue is, as time goes on, a lot of this feedback kind of gets worse and worse because, slowly, because FromSoft games started to have this kind of attention of, like, being super hard, even though they're really not, unless you play them wrong. Like, like, people started just wanting harder and harder boss fights, more and more difficulty, and, fucking FromSoft was like, well, if that's what our fans want, sure. And I think it's had a negative impact overall. Obviously, not a very big negative impact, but I feel like it's still noticeable. And more than that, even if it was only a minor negative impact, I still think it's sucky that a fucking, game series as genuinely unique as a lot of, like, FromSoft stuff had to basically kowtow to a very sort of, like, losery mindset in terms of, like, how do you make a good game? Because, and that's something which I've seen, thankfully, a lot of people would admit, even if they may not, think the older games are better than the newer ones, at the very least, a lot of these people will still admit that, the old games were at the very least interesting, and if they don't, they're lying. But yeah, like, so much of From Software's old lineup of games was both interesting and unique. You had stuff like Evergrace and Kingsfield, obviously. Even before that, you had, like, Armored Core, which, thankfully, Armored Core 6 exists now, but, like, can we have more, please? And it's very much one of those things where, like, like, Armored Core 6 was hated by some hardcore FromSoft fans because they weren't actual FromSoft fans and they were just fans of the Souls games. And so they, like, you know, they were used to playing Souls games where the best way to go through a challenge is to take it head on and beat the boss at their own game. And then when that strategy doesn't work in a different video game, they got mad because they weren't taking the game on its own terms, you know, they weren't playing the game as it was intended, but instead they were applying their preconceived notions of how the game should work on the game, and when it wasn't kowtowing to them, when it was providing pushback because they were playing it wrong, gamers got mad. And I find it funny because, like, really, that is one of the funniest things that has happened, especially to a franchise that basically coined the phrase "get good," because they were mad they were having a skill issue. And there is, like, obviously, like, some level of animosity between the new FromSoft fans and the fans of the old FromSoft. Because fans of the old FromSoft are very clearly mad that, like, all of the resources in FromSoft are going to games which they don't give a shit about. And then in return, a lot of the new FromSoft fans are mad at the old fans because the old fans want games which the new fans see zero value in. Which is dumb. The second one of those is dumb. The first one I understand, but, like, what can you do? The second one is just dumb. Also, why do boats only spawn in when you get really close to them? Like, look at this. There's no boat here, right? Wrong. It's somewhere here. No, it's over there. I don't know. Boats spawn weirdly close to you. But yeah, look, I haven't done the roof. But, we did 2 of them. So, yeah, I guess we can continue working on walling off the underwater bits here. But yeah. It is kind of, I guess, one of the most disappointing things about the whole From Software stuff is just the fact that, like, there's never gonna be any kind of mending of the, like, discourse, I guess. Because both sides want things that are completely opposed to each other. And, like, that's sort of the thing, right? What do FromSoft fans want? Which FromSoft fan? They're not a monolith. But a lot of people like to pretend they are. Because it's easier to then, you know, make videos talking about how stupid FromSoft fans are for, you know... Actually, I'll stop over here. And then wall around this. Because there's no point. I'll just make it, like, I'll just make pillars for the other ones. Because it'll take me, like, 50 billion years otherwise. And all the stone I have. So... I'll do this until, like, over here. Shit. Yeah, I like this. And then... I'll fill this in. I'll fill in the slabs a little bit later. But yeah, this is the idea. We'll have, like, the actual structure on the inside, and then we'll have the truss supporting it. Because that's how it would work in real life, I assume. But I will probably then still extend the side, like, 2 or 3 blocks down, because just having it float directly on the water would feel kinda weird. But hey, what can you do? Well, I'll tell you what I can do. I can just surface. And we'll continue next time, so we'll see you then. Goodbye.